think, guys, we are already live. Yes, we are. Okay. We'll be starting any second now, guys. Just remember there's a chat here. Paste that in there. Okay. How to stretch a herniated disc. This is something we get a lot of comments on, and hopefully this is going to help you guys. One of the things that is glaringly obvious is that when we have these bulging or herniated discs in the lower back, it's a compression injury, right? The way in which the disc works is that we've got the annulus fibrosus, which holds the nucleus pulposus in place. The annulus fibrosus, think of it as the skin on a water balloon, right? Its job is to bear load. So when we squash down on the discs, the skin, the annulus, this bit out here, not the red bit, is the bit that's holding the fluid in place. And so when we have a herniated disc, it's happened because we have compressed down on here to the point where the fluid has started to try and escape through specific areas of the compromised annulus fibrosus. And so that is something that we need to understand. So naturally people go, well, what can I do to stretch? What can I do to take pressure off the disc? How can I stretch my herniated disc? And that might lead people to doing things like hanging from the bar up there and trying to do a dead hang. There are issues with that. I'll talk about them in a second. But it is right that we want to try and take some pressure off the disc because the discs are a load-bearing structure. They fail in load-bearing, and we need to support them in that process. So one of the important parts of recovery, alongside our rehabilitation work, that's the stuff that actually gets us better, is being able to intermittently or periodically provide some decompression, some stretch, some unloading of these herniated discs so we can give them a bit of respite more than anything else. And so there are strategies that we can use. Now, one of the natural strategies, we get this comment all the time, what about going and hanging on the bar in the gym? What about doing the classic dead hang? I'm just gonna hang here and it feels nice and stretched. It's opening out my lumbar spine. It feels good. It feels like it's taking pressure off the lower back. Is that something that I should be doing? And for most people with a more acute herniated disc, meaning they're a bit more sensitive right now, doing something like a dead hang there, it creates too much negative pressure in the disc and over too short a period. And to highlight this to you guys as a comparison, one of the things that we do here in the clinic is doing spinal decompression. And that's where we're taking the patient, lying down on their back, and we are gently unloading those discs. And then when they finish, we gently put them back together again and they stand up nice and slowly. And so, for example, we might have a patient where we're doing a 60-pound unloading on them. So 60 pounds of maximum pull on the lower back to take pressure off those herniated discs. And in that instance, we might ramp up over a period of 90 to 120 seconds to steadily apply that decompression to the lumbar spine. And so when we're doing that, it's very, very graduated. Whereas if I've got a herniated disc and I'm just hanging from a bar up there, that change in pressure can be sometimes too dramatic for the individual, even the change of decompression, and it creates this discomfort as we start to pull. Sometimes it is very relieving, and there are many of you guys that have tried that decompression, hanging from the bar to take pressure off these herniated discs, and it feels nice in the moment, and that's perfectly reasonable. That's fantastic. If it feels nice and you don't get pain when you put yourself back together, and all the better for you. That's awesome. But if you're finding you're getting worse and it's not actually providing the relief that you think it was supposed to, then it's probably that you're pulling a little bit too hard and there's too much load and too much swing in the decompression happening at the level of the disc that it's actually bothering you more than it's actually helping. And so there are other alternatives that we can use to help take pressure off these herniated discs in a more sensible manner. And so one of the options, and you guys can all do these for free at home to take pressure off these discs, is the towel decompression. This is where we are lying over a small rolled up towel placed underneath the lumbar spine that creates a little bit of decompression, particularly if we place it in the right spot to the L4-5 and the L5-S1 segments of the lumbar spine, decompressing those areas quite gently. And at the same time as decompressing the actual discs themselves, we're also taking pressure off the muscles, because so many people with these kind of injuries, they're not only compressing down, but they're compressing down and they're putting chronic strain through these ligaments on the back and the muscles, and they feel tension in the lower back and assume that this tension is something that is required to be stretched more, when in actual fact, when you lie over the towel, it decompresses and takes pressure off those muscles and ligaments to give them a bit of respite. Just looking in here, I think I've put this camera in the wrong place because this is going to be a nightmare to try and read the comments, but I'm just going to flick back through some of the comments, guys, on TikTok here. If you guys are on YouTube or any other platforms, then you can always post down in the comments and we'll go through some of the Q&A in a second. Just looking for the first one here from Gav. I've been working through a herniated disc at L5S1 with an annular tear at 4-5. It's been 4 or 5 months. How long to heal? Very, very good question here. And by the way, guys, you guys will notice this if you've been on some of the other live streams. Sorry about the beeping. Someone's doing some reversing outside. Most of you guys have issues at L4-5 and L5S1. Those are the areas that you've injured. And one important thing to understand is if you've got a herniated disc, you might think, oh, well, annular tear, that's not relevant to me. It's like, understand, what do you think that this material went through? Even though the word annular tear might not be referenced, it's kind of a foregone conclusion that if the stuff that was supposed to be in here is now out here, we have annular tears, even if not explicitly mentioned, right? You're going to have damage to the annulus fibrosus because that's how it actually happens. So very, very important to note that. But in terms of how long to heal, this is the question that's on everybody's lips. Everybody always wants to go, how long is it going to take me to get better? And it entirely depends on whether you're doing the right stuff or not. If you're quote unquote taking some pain medication and just letting it resolve on its own, as is so often the advice, or take these pain medications, muscle relaxants, and it'll get better on its own, we are sorely mistaken, because much of the reason that these things don't get better is not for lack of healing. Your body is trying, Gav, his body is trying to heal every single day. It's going through that healing process. But the problem is there are so many things that you're doing on a daily basis that are interfering with that process, like picking the scab, so to speak, that are preventing the natural recovery process from taking place. These tissues, these ligamentous tissues, heal very, very slowly. They heal very, very slowly. Their remodeling rate is very, very slow. And you could say that if you tore a muscle, that rate is very, very slow compared to a cut on the surface of your skin. But a muscle is much, much faster than the ligamentous tissues in the disc. And so that's an important thing to understand. But the time starts when you start doing the right sort of stuff, not based on when your injury happened. So you'll get some people that in 4 or 5 months, they're back doing what they want to do because they've done the right sort of things. Others, where they're not doing the right sort of things, they don't have some of these attributes, good muscle strength, coordination, good movement habits, and they really, really struggle. So the clock starts when you start doing the right sort of stuff. You should be doing spine stability exercises. Things like the dead bug, marching bridge, the squat, the hip hinge, the step up. Those are the fundamentals that we talk about because they're teaching you how to protect this thing every single day. If you're doing things like the knee hugs, the child's pose, the hugging your knees and all that kind of stuff, sciatic nerve flossing, then you're doing things that are undermining the healing process, in our opinion. And so we're going to find we're going in circles. And so it really is important. What are you doing precisely to help that healing and recovery process? And then the second question is, well, obviously, are we doing the right things? But the second question is, healed for what precisely? Because you might be healed enough to pick up your toddler, but you might not be healed enough to go and do a hip hinge, not a hip hinge, that's the example in the gym, but you might not be healed enough to help your other half move furniture from the lounge into the kitchen, right? Or something like that. So you have to think about healed for what? The recovery and rehabilitation process is really a healing process that extends into a strengthening process. They are fundamentally the same, and where we draw that line is obviously a matter of debate. But make no mistake, your rehabilitation turns into strengthening. And the nice thing about using spine stability exercises like the squats and the hip hinges is that you have a fundamental, very clear understanding of what you are capable of dealing with. You have that loading tolerance. You know very well, Gav, that you can't do a squat with 20 kilos because it's too much for your back. It's too much, it sets off that herniated disc. But you can do it with 15 kilos. And so you know that if you're going to come into everyday life, you're not healed to deal with something that might exert about 30 kilos worth of loading. And that's how we gauge how healed we are going through that process. But 4 to 5 months is more than enough time to make some good progress. And if we're not making good progress in that time frame, we're not doing the right stuff. And that's very important. Or one of the extra complications one could say is you might be doing the right stuff, but a bunch of the wrong stuff as well, right? And those sorts of scenarios happen all the time. What other questions have we got here? Down the bottom, we've got herniated disc at L5S1, try to walk but can't stand up straight, feels like a pinching and I get numbness. One of the reasons that you guys struggle to stand up to walk is because you're sat down with your back rounded like so. If we just take this segment up here, most of you are going to be L5S1 down here, but you can see this better, right? You're sat slumped in the chair like so, right? You're like, oh, okay. And then you go to get up, see what I'm doing with my back, rounding the lower back, and then you go to straighten up. As you go to straighten up, look at the size of this hole. As you go to straighten up, it goes back to its normal size, a normal size. You're not extending, you're not going into extension, you're just coming back up to neutral. But because there's a lot of inflammation in this hole here where the nerves come out, as you close that hole around the pressure increases and you literally get stuck. You can't move. And part of that is there's just too much congestion in the area, right? So this is where things like leverage and contrast bathing, those kind of strategies can really help manage the excess inflammation. But at the same time, we need to not be doing things that are getting us stuck into that position. If you're sitting for extended durations, you will notice that you get this locking as you go to stand up. If you literally just went over, it's worth trying, right? If you're standing up, you're like, I'm kind of okay, I'm maybe in a bit of pain. And then you go and sit down, and then you go to get straight up, you probably won't notice that same locking up. But if you've been sat down for 5 minutes, 10 minutes, maybe longer or maybe less, and then you go to get up, you notice it. And that's because the inflammation's building up. And coupled with the fact that you're probably not getting out of the chair properly, right? We're probably doing a bit of this sort of stuff. As opposed to get your feet underneath you, get your chest out, and then just stand straight up vertical. That can literally make a night and day difference. But most of that is that sitting is not ideal if we have an injury to the herniated disc, because when we sit, we put anywhere from 40 to 90% more load through that injury. So is it any wonder that we get symptoms when we then go to stand up and straighten ourselves back up again? Now, just looking at some of the more comments here. Ryan has said the main cause of back pain is due to inflammation. The main cause of inflammation is carbohydrates. I think we're sipping too much of the inflammation Kool-Aid there. The main cause of back pain is a back injury, and inflammation is part of that process and is often a significant issue. But you've got an injury, right? And the other thing to bear in mind is inflammation is a good process. Out of control inflammation, uncontrolled inflammation, abnormal inflammation, too much inflammation taking place in these small spaces is a issue. But I think too many people, I know we did a video on this the other day, are getting on the anti-inflammation anti-inflammation bandwagon, and it's just not, we're not being sophisticated enough with our implication of these things. Sure, having excess sugar, not very good, and all that kind of stuff, like yes, we can say it, but let's not close our eyes to the glaringly obvious injury in our back that is there, that actually needs to be rehabilitated. No therapist give any medication or supplement. I wonder why. Because we've got an injury, right? We have an injury. Is it okay to do relief exercises in a flare-up? Then go back to strengthening exercises. I mean, what else are we going to do that's safer, right? Really important point. What are you going to do on a daily basis that is safer than your rehabilitation exercises? Getting dressed is more risky. Going to the toilet, more risky. Making coffee in the morning, more risky. Like, this is the point that we're really trying to hammer home to you guys, so you actually start doing stuff that gets you better, is that there is nothing you can do every day that is safer than your rehabilitation and stroke relief-based exercises done carefully. Everything else is much more uncontrolled, much less conscientious when it comes to your back. And so the default should be to do the exercises and look at cutting out everything else, not the other way around. I have a scan and they said nothing was wrong, but my lower back is killing me. Often that is a clinical judgment. So often they'll get the MRI back or the X-ray back and they'll go, oh, there's some changes here. But you're 37, 55, 28. It's normal age-related wear and tear. What do you expect? That's basically like nowadays going to the doctors and going, oh, you're overweight, but it's within normal limits, so there's nothing wrong with you. It's like, would it be better to not be overweight? Would it be better not to have degeneration at L5S1, even if you're making the claim that it is appropriate or normal within the population? So often people will have some minor injuries, which a minor injury to the lower back can be managed very poorly to the point where you feel that it is something that is major. And it just gets dismissed. So then you end up going in circles thinking you're mad up here, when actually there is an injury there. It's just being managed so poorly that you're really struggling with it. So don't necessarily get caught out with that kind of inference that your practitioner might make of the scans. Always look at the actual report, because saying there's nothing wrong with you or there's nothing there is a clinical comment, not actually the findings of the X-ray or MRI. Alongside rehab work, would you recommend collagen and calcium supplements? I don't really recommend those per se. Not that I don't recommend them, but get your protein intake right first. Get a good diet first. Get your food, your supplements from whole, real food. If you're not getting enough protein on a daily basis, what does that look like? Generally speaking, we shoot for 1.5, 1.6 grams per kilogram of body weight as being a good target. If you're not meeting that, I would argue there's very little point taking things like collagen supplements. Not that I don't take collagen supplements, but I'm getting the protein first. Get the protein from whole food first, and then look at adding to that. Too many people want to go to the supplement before they've actually got a reasonable diet. And so that's an important, don't put the cart before the horse in these sorts of scenarios. What other comments have we got? SK says, I got better by doing nothing, got worse when I did something. Very, very simplistic view of things. And I think so often people do get better by doing nothing, but you don't live by doing nothing. And so what we do is we shrink our life down to such a level that we're so safe, right? We're not doing anything, but that's not how we live in the real world. And that often becomes a very, very, lonely place in many cases. We can't do those things. We just choose not to do them anymore. You don't need to be like that. You do need to rehabilitate and rebuild. But often the process of rebuilding, it takes a bit of time. There is a bit of trial and error, but you can get through that. I think it's not an appropriate answer for the long term to just shrink away and do nothing. That doesn't work for the long term for many people. I don't think it leads to anywhere positive, to be honest. What other questions have we got? SIJ dysfunction. Any different recommendations to your usual suggestions? Yeah, I think I'd disregard the SIJ dysfunction unless you're pregnant. If you're pregnant or you've just given birth, then yes, you can get SIJ issues. But SIJ, like, how do you move the SIJ? And what does SIJ dysfunction even mean, right? And how has it been diagnosed? I remember doing some digging around into the research around SIJ specifically, sacroiliac joint. That's the joint, the interaction between the sacrum, the orange bone here, and the pelvis, or the innominate bone here, right? In all but the pregnant lady, they don't really move that much. And they certainly don't move to the point where an individual can perceive that, even a trained individual. And I remember coming across some research specifically that looked at trained practitioners evaluating the SIJ movement. And most of the time, what they found was all these practitioners were feeling, various specialists, was the skin moving over the bone. They're not actually feeling any real movement in that area, aside again from the pregnant lady where it's a bit more perceivable, right? Because of the ligament laxity, et cetera, et cetera. I think often the SIJ is just diagnosed as some people really like that as a diagnosis, but it's a lumbopelvic issue. It's a lumbopelvic issue, and that's the best layer of depth, if we will, or layer of analysis that you guys should be using. Guys, if you've got any other questions, please do roll them in. Those of you that are on YouTube, those of you on TikTok, just keep going through these as long as they're coming in. So what else have we got? Laminectomy surgery 6 weeks ago. How long should I expect to recover? It entirely depends on so many variables. The most important thing is not setting this expectation of how long till I recover. It's more a case of you've just got to move forward. There are so many variables. How strong are you? How coordinated are you? Are you able to do movements like the squats, hip hinges, step-ups? There's that bug. If you can't even lie on the floor and wiggle one leg without your back moving all over the place, then you're going to have a longer recovery than someone that can. And that's why pre-rehabilitation, before you have things like surgery, can actually make such a difference. So it's hugely variable from one individual to the next. And it's not a question that one can actually answer in a sensible way. The tissues of your back that are trying to heal and restore stability, the ligamentous tissues primarily, are going to heal over a matter of months. They're not healing over a matter of days and weeks. Much of the pain that will be associated with what you're experiencing will be down to the inflammation. So if you reduce what you're doing and try and take out the aggravating factors from your daily life, you'll get to a point where you can feel better reasonably quickly, but you'll feel vulnerable. And so then it's a question of how quickly can you build up the strength and support for the spine. And building muscular work or improving the muscles that provide protection for that area of the lower back can happen in a matter of weeks. However, you need to first be have the appropriate level of technique in order to benefit from the exercise. And that might take longer than a couple of weeks. So you've got to get the technique right to perform the exercise first. Then you've got to actually find the right difficulty with which you're challenging those muscles so they actually change. Then you've got to do that for a period of weeks to get change in the muscles. And all the while, the ligaments are going through the healing process in the background. So that kind of gives you that first framework of like, how long does it take to get tissue healing? Not feeling better, but how long in terms of recovering from the injury. That gives you that framework. And then it's down to the individual skill. One person might be able to master some of those technique movements relatively quickly in a matter of days, right? And then they're on to finding what kind of level can they work at. Other people take a matter of months to actually be able to master some of these movements and get to a point where they're actually challenging the muscles to get them stronger. So it's hugely variable based on the individual's ability. The nice thing is if you just follow a framework, you go at the pace you go at. And if you've got support along the way, then you can find and muddle your way through that process at the pace that you can go at. You can only go at your own personal pace. Some of you guys are going to have knee issues that are confounding variables as you're going through the process. Others of you have kids that you're looking after. You know, if you're like me and you've got 2 kids under the age of 3, then you're going to have a little bit more of a challenge than someone else who doesn't. If you're a little bit older, you're going to have certain challenges. So it's hugely variable. But all you can do is start to make improvement. And the nice thing about exercises like the spine stability ones that we talk about on the channel all the time is that they are the test and the evaluation tool. For example, your squat right now might just look like this, right? You've had the surgery and all you're doing is that, right? That's all you squat. But then you can see that especially if you're recording yourself, like we talk about all the time, you can see that over the course of the weeks and months ahead, you're actually building strength because now you can do a squat that maybe goes closer to 90 degrees and you're using a little bit of weight. So you see yourself improving over time. Very, very difficult question to answer because there's so many variables around one individual's back pain and recovering from it compared to another. Bodyweight squats and step-ups or light machine hack squats and leg press for herniation rehab, Mike has asked, or Maiko. I would steer well clear of the hack squats. I would steer well clear of the leg press, particularly the leg press. I mean, hack squats, we could potentially get into that a little bit later on. We're forgetting what the benefit of your rehab is. The squat is not just to do a squat to lift weight to make progress on the muscular side of things. It's also a movement practice. You're practicing the action of getting up and down, stabilizing your spine with leg movement in the real world so that you have a better control. If you just sat there pumping out the leg press, that's not going to give you those spillover benefits that are so beneficial. Understand that when we're looking at recovering from back injuries, much of the benefit that people make when they come through, for example, the program, and by the way, there's a link in the comments on YouTube, and you can always check out the profile page on TikTok. Much of the benefit you make is from improving your technical ability to control this and protect this spine down here from re-injury. And so you're allowing inflammation to calm down, healing to start to take place when you're practicing your squat. You're not getting that benefit if you're in the gym doing a leg press. What's worse is that a leg press specifically means that you're going to jack up the strength of your legs as is compared to your spine and create a greater disparity, which is a problem, I would argue. If you're going to be a guy in the gym, going to be a bodybuilder, sure, use those as a tool. But the reason that we choose the exercises that we choose are that they are applicable to daily life, actions of daily life. So you don't want to use stuff that makes them less applicable just so we can, I would argue, massage our ego by lifting a lot of weight on the leg press. Not that that's what was suggested here, but that's why guys typically go over to do the leg press because it allows us to put lots of plates on there and it looks good on social media. But it's not going to help us if we're trying to recover from a back injury. If you're a bodybuilder, that's different, right? Different advice. And you wouldn't come to me for that advice. You come to someone else. So hopefully that makes a bit of sense, Mike. Stick to the real stuff. And later on, if you're trying to do certain things, if you want to use leg press, specifically leg press, I would say, over the hack squat, because that's still got spinal loading. Say you did want to use leg press to give your spinal loading a bit of a break, but still challenge the legs, that makes perfect sense, right? That's a sensible strategic application. We've got T here, neck reversed lordosis and multi-level drying out of the discs, bulging. Yeah, you're seeing a lot of this. We had one of the members talk about this the other day. This reversal of the cervical lordosis. All the same problems that we talk about in the lower back are there in the neck as well with modern society. We spend too much time sat down, slumped in the chair all day, and most of the time we're on our phone like so. And you are eliminating the natural lordosis bending forwards. This is one of the reasons why some of our videos for the neck, we talk about don't do chin tucks, because chin tucks were exercises that were really great for an era where you had this kind of stooped over posture like so. And we're not getting that nowadays. Smartphones, we often have this flattening out of the thoracic spine and a reversal of the cervical lordosis, which is not very good for the health of the cervical discs. And you see people with a way more out of line neck nowadays than the lower back, and you'll get away with it for a while. But when you then have an injury, it's quite difficult because you want to stretch the muscles more, but the muscles are already stretched. And so an understanding is really important. Any of you guys that are struggling with neck issues, just send us a DM and say, hey, Mike, can you send me a link to the Whiplash podcast? You might feel like, oh no, well, I don't have Whiplash. Watch the podcast because it'll help you understand, read the article. It's very detailed. It's like 1,000 to 3,000 words of detail written by me. And it'll help you understand your neck a little bit better, so you avoid some of the mistakes. And there's some other exercises in that particular article that will help you guys. What have we got here? Christy has said, I've hurt my back at the bottom. It clicked out, couldn't walk. Got it to click in, the muscles are still sore. It sounds like you've injured the lower lumbar spine. A lot of the stuff we've been talking about here would be helpful for you, Christine. I have a 9-hour flight and safari, small disc herniation at L5S1. You just got to do the best you can, right? If you've got a bit of time before you've got that trip, then try your best to get some rehab work done so you're a little bit more conscientious while you're out there. But do the best you can. Then when you get back, you've got to start working on the rehab side of things. If you need more help with that, check out the link in the profile page. And also, Katerina and anyone else who's got any long trips or anything like that booked. I mean, we're coming back into school time, so maybe not necessarily now, but send us a DM because we've got the travel podcast, which will be helpful for you. It's got a bunch of different tips to think about from a back health point of view. Very good to watch before you go traveling so you can have a smoother trip and decrease the likelihood of trouble. Yeah, that's for you, Katerina. What would you describe as the lower left sharp pain on hyperextension leaning back? One of the big problems with how we diagnose a facet joint issue is often it's a facet provocative test, right? So as we go backwards and we arch a little bit to the side, and the theory here is, and what you're taught is that as you go backwards, you're compressing the facet joints, which is true. But what you're also doing is you're closing the hole where the nerve comes out. So as you go backwards and you go like that, you close this little hole where the nerve comes out. And so if you've got a bit of disc bulge in that spot or disc herniation in that spot, it makes it practically indistinguishable. How do you know it's not the fact that the hole's closing around the nerve with a bit of disc in it that's increasing the pressure on the nerve or the facet joint? Which is why I think for most of you guys, getting caught up about the facet joint or the disc, you've got an injury to your lower back is the level of understanding that you guys need to have. You've injured something between here and it's most likely down here at the last 2 segments of the lumbar spine. L4-5, this one here, and L5-S1 are the ones that most people have injured. Now, you might have other changes on the MRI, etc., at levels higher up, but that tends to be where most of the damage and irritation and injury is residing, the root cause of your sciatica, etc. It's not piriformis. And so that's the level of analysis you want to have. And then from a rehab point of view, all you're able to do functionally is actually stabilize the midsection. You can stabilize the area between your lower rib cage and your pelvic ring. That's all you can do. Learn to stabilize that region. Whether you've got an L5-S1 disc bulge on the left or you've got an L4-5 problem on the right, it's the same thing. It's providing stability. Where we get caught out is we end up chasing symptoms. Well, my sharp pain is on the left and John's is on the right. Do I not need different exercises? Sure, if you're looking for gimmicky little hacks about getting in funny positions and then releasing your back pain in 3.5 minutes, then fine. You're gonna go for those kind of things. But if you're looking for actually fixing the underlying problem, supporting the healing process and rebuilding resilience into your lower back so that you cannot have these flare-ups all the time and this vulnerability, then you just follow a spine stability structured program to rebuild resilience in an objective way in your lower back so that it is verifiably stronger than it was before. And then you'll notice, you'll retest that hyperextension, that backward bending through a cobra, for example, and you'll notice, that doesn't hurt so much anymore. Oh, it doesn't hurt at all anymore. That doesn't mean you need to keep doing it, but you validated that healing is starting to take place there. Just looking for some new comments on here. What else have we got? James said, are there any stretches to help alongside the rehab? James, I don't know if you're a member of the program, but in the program, we talk a lot about core relief work. We've just this last weekend, released the brand new Back in Shape 2.0, and we've got the rehab work, and then you've got the core relief work. The core relief work is the stretches, the decompression, those kind of things, the lower body stretching, massage guns, all that kind of stuff to help provide relief for the strain that builds up every single day on the lower back. And that should be married and paired with the proper strengthening work that you're doing as part of your rehabilitation exercises. Well, the question is, what is contrast bathing? So contrast bathing, it's not my device. We did have a link on the website at one point, but you're better off just buying these off Amazon. This is the Cube by Therabody. This does hot and cold. You just press 2 buttons. I think the battery's dead. Yeah, the battery's dead because it gets used. It does hot and cold in here. I think it goes like 8 to 42 degrees. That is a way more convenient mechanism for doing contrast bathing. And it's just basically going hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold. We used to not recommend contrast bathing as much, primarily because the barriers to actually doing these things is really important. So people go, I can't be bothered to go back and forth from the freezer to the microwave, so I'm just not going to do it. And that's something that you have to actually take on board. And that's just from a feedback point of view, right? You tell me, do contrast bathing, you come back next week, I say, have you done it? I say, yeah, I did it once. It's like, well, that's not enough. I say, why not? I say, because it's a bit of a faff. I say, okay, you don't bother. So that's why a lot of the stuff we talk about is just do icing, right? 3 to 5 minutes, ice directly over the lumbar spine, and that's sufficient. But if you can, doing the contrast bathing works better. And if you want to spend the money, those kind of devices are really helpful. You can get them off Amazon. And you place it directly over the source of the problem. And that helps you manage inflammation. Because like we were saying in the earlier comment, inflammation is a good process. It is a good process. It's the process by which our body drives resources to an area, the immune system, etc., to help with healing. But in these confined spaces where the nerves come out, especially if there's the presence of something like a disc bulge as well, excess out of control congestion can be just as problematic as the injury itself, creating symptoms of sciatica, etc. And so having a mechanism to try and manage that, such as contrast bathing, is a side effect-free way of you managing inflammation in a local region rather than just popping pills and pills and pills of anti-inflammatories. So that's what contrast bathing is. Typically speaking, we say 3 to 5 minutes of hot, cold, hot, cold, hot, cold, and finish on cold ideally. And then don't do anything too crazy, right? If you've just finished doing your cold, don't then decide you want to go and take the bins out or hoover the house, vacuum the house. You know, give yourself a few minutes till you come back to body temperature, because the muscles aren't going to particularly like the cold. So you might feel a little bit stiff afterwards, which is completely normal, and it'll settle down as soon as you return to body temperature. Just looking at some of the comments here. Guys, we're coming up to half an hour. I'm going into the last half an hour, guys. I'll keep going until the hour. If you guys have questions on YouTube, on TikTok, please do keep posting them in the comments, and I'll carry on running through these. Luke said, I thought I was having a local, but they said sedation. Okay. You guys having a little chat there. Thoughts on IDD therapy for a herniated disc? We have an IDD therapy machine behind that wall. Those of you guys on TikTok, I think I did a TikTok comment earlier today where I literally show you guys the machine. Or I was in there because I was setting it up for my brother actually coming in. It's a good treatment. If I've injured my back, I'm on there. If I injured my neck, I'm on there from jiu-jitsu. My brother has been a bit silly and hurt his back. It's probably just a minor way. But get on table. It's good. It is good. But it is not, what's the word? It's not the whole thing, right? And yes, we've got the decompression table here. They're not cheap. They are worth having. They're great, right? Not saying you guys need to buy them. But they're a great tool, but they are a tool. They are not the fix, right? So you've got your treatment, whether it's something like IDD, which I'm a big fan of, hence why we've got a table. Laser, which you've got in the other room. It might be some other treatment from some other clinician, some other practitioner. They are great, but they are the top of the pyramid. It needs to be leveraged on a foundation of good rehab work, on a foundation of good education, to make sure that you don't have a great treatment and then go do something stupid right afterwards, because that's just going to undo. They're not magic. And healing doesn't, you're not substantially healed because they don't all of a sudden 1000% increase the rate of healing that's taking place in your lower back. The cells that are injured in this area, they are active. They have a metabolic rate that is fixed. And so that's not all of a sudden like giving you like 10 months worth of healing in the 20 minutes that you're on the machine. The expectation of what these things are doing is really important. That's not to say it's not good, right? It is good. It's really good. But it has to be leveraged and understood effectively and paired with appropriate rehab so that you're not having a treatment that's really cool and then undermining that at home as soon as you leave the clinic with bad practices and bad habits. And so I would suggest that make a bit of progress on your rehab, and then if you've got a clinic close to you, leverage it. If you were, for example, we're over in Cheltenham, right? In Gloucestershire. If you were an hour and a half, 2 hours drive away, don't come and see us. Do your rehab first, then by all means come down. But do your rehab first, because the rehab stuff is the stuff that means that when you then come in, you're a better canvas upon which the treatment can work. If you're so weak and wobbly and you're flopping all over the place and have no control whatsoever for your spine, you're having a flare-up from picking up a spine, then what's the likelihood of you getting off that decompression table and doing something silly while you're walking out the front door to the car and messing things up again? It's reasonable, right? So the safest route is actually for you to do the rehab at home first and then leverage treatments to progress on. Maybe that sounds a bit controversial, but I think when you start to think about it, it actually makes a bit more sense. With loads, so Shannon has asked, with loads of other symptoms, but they won't look again, saying it's just hypermobility. I think I'm missing the first part of that question, Shannon. I have EDS and had a bulging disc at L4-5. Now I'm in agony, but they won't look. I mean, you've got the answer to the question. You've got an injury at L4-5. You need to do the rehab work. What more we need to look at, right? And this is the question. Sometimes people are going for, endless looking. We've got an injury, right? We've got an injury and we've got a bit of hypermobility. It's not hypermobility is the problem. Hypermobility is a challenge that people face. If you have a degree of hypermobility, generally speaking, you have less stability. And when we've got an injury, we have even more instability. And so hypermobility, those of you guys that struggle with EDS, with just generalized hypermobility, you may be a bit more flexible. and then you have a back injury, it is a liability in the early stages of recovery. But as you build strength and stability, that hypermobility actually can be a little bit of an asset long term. But you have to build strength and stability. And what you often find is those with the hypermobility sways, persuasions, etc., are often the same ones that are going to yoga classes 5 times a week and doing a bunch of stretching, feeling like they're tight all the time. Yet objectively, they are actually significantly more mobile than the average. And they need to go down the strengthening route. You're lacking strength, stability. That's what you need to do to build, rather than more yoga classes and flexibility work. But if we've got the diagnosis of an L4-5 disc bulge, we know what's wrong. Let's do the work to fix it, which is the rehab work. Luke is having a steroid injection, an L4-5 today. I hope it goes well. Just make sure you understand what the steroid injection is doing. It's doing absolutely nothing for the healing process. You should have the support from the clinicians that are doing the injection to make sure that you understand that you are not healed after you've had that injection. It's doing precisely nothing for the healing process, but it might well give you a little bit of pain relief. They might be using it in a diagnostic purpose. You should understand that before you have the injection. And then you know what direction you're going to go in, right? I've had my injection, I've got this guidance post-rehab, post-procedure, and I'm going to make sure I'm starting to work rehab. But one great question for them is you say, hey doc, I've just had my injection, fantastic, I'm feeling X, whatever you feel. Am I able to start practicing some squats carefully? And then he goes, no. And you go, okay, how do I get out my chair then? And he goes, oh, well, you just stand up. You say, isn't that a squat? And then he goes, well, yeah, it kind of is. So why can't I do squats yet I can get out of the chair? How am I going to get home? Oh, you're going to get in the car. Okay, well, is it better to just be doing those things in any sort of way? Or is it better to start to learn, how do I control myself? Is this, like you go and stand next to the doctor and say, well, I'm trying to learn how to control my spine so I can protect my back. Is doing something like that, you know, really practicing, and then, oh, that's too far. I rounded my lower back. Okay, I don't want to do that. So is that going to be okay? And then when he says no, say, okay, well, what about straining on the toilet? Is that okay? Oh, well, if you have to, you have to. Okay, so I can do that, but I shouldn't do my rehab. Be really, really, do your best to try and get some concrete guidance rather than knee-jerk reactions with regards to the rehabilitation that you're supposed to be doing post-injection. Because when they say just go home and do all sorts of stuff, it's like, you don't know what I'm doing at home. You have no idea. What does taking it easy mean? What does rest mean? Oh, just lie down. Oh, so I lie down for the next 6 weeks or 6 days? Is that what you're saying? Because I'm going to have significant muscle atrophy there. So try your best to dig out a really well thought out response from the surgeon or the surgical team that are delivering the injection, so you can get the benefit from the guidance. Because I think all too often you just get a knee-jerk response of don't do too much for the next few weeks and see how it goes. That's not rehab guidance, and that doesn't reflect the reality that you are a patient that's going to go home and have to live for the next few weeks. You're not sitting there in a test tube on a shelf somewhere floating around in suspended animation for the next 2 weeks. So we have to respect that and therefore give appropriate guidance, which is why we talk about doing the spine stability work, because you're going to be doing stuff that's more strenuous than that every day anyway. Owen has said he can do both squats and hip hinges and hinge exercises. Awesome. Yeah, those would be good exercises to start with, Owen. Definitely good exercises because you're doing them anyway. What else have we got here? Had only L4-5 decompression and disc procedure 4 months ago. Can this make the right side unstable? I don't think it can directly make the right side unstable, but it's reasonable to suggest that if we haven't done the rehabilitation work, protein shake time, then we're going to have a degree of instability at that level of the back anyway, and we should be really working on stabilizing that area. What's an ab exercise that doesn't hurt the lower back as a beginner? Squats. And people say, oh, well, what's a squat? The best exercises for your core are exercises that replicate the way in which the core works in real life. So people think, oh, I'll do some sit-ups, I'll do some crunches, I'll do some Russian twists, all that kind of stuff. I'll do some abdominal rotations, right? Some of those have a place. But the most important thing you can do if you've got a bad back and you're trying to rebuild strength and stability is use exercises that challenge your spine. We're really missing something if we don't think our core is working when we do a squat holding a weight, right? If I grab a weight, if I do not stabilize my core as I'm holding the weight, I will fold forwards and collapse. So my core is involved in a squat. It is involved in a step up when I've got the weight on one side. Right? You've got that asymmetry of challenge, right? So that's why we put those exercises in there. They are the best core exercises. You've obviously got the dead bug, you've got the marching bridges, which help you learn to engage the core as well and stimulate it. But the squat is a great scalable exercise. You know, squatting with 50, 60 kilos or more, not saying you have to do this, but if you're able to do that, you're demonstrating a strong core because something's holding the bar up and it's not fairy dust. Gym can help you from sciatica. Yes, it can. If you're doing the right exercises, right? You don't just go to the gym. Like often you get the guidance of, oh, just go and do exercise. That is not smart advice. If you're a doctor or whatever, or your specialist says, what should I do for rehab? And you go, they go, oh, just do some exercise, just do some light exercise, or go do some cycling, go swimming. They're demonstrating their lack of knowledge. That is not appropriate. That's not guided. That's not anything. That's just silliness. You may as well say just go home and make a cup of tea. That's really, really silly advice. And the same as going to the gym. If you've got a back injury, do a rehab program for your back, right? Do something that's actually focused on rebuilding back health, not just go and have a session in the gym. That's not appropriate advice at all. Jack said, still struggling to stand for more than 10 minutes and I can't sit upright yet. Is it too early to do IDD? I mean, you can leverage IDD, but to think IDD or spinal decompression is fixing you is the wrong way to think about it. Do the rehab work. Maybe schedule something for a fortnight or something like that. Or if you want to, you can do it, but you've got to acknowledge your expectations that you might go in and have IDD and it will feel great. It's a really good, like if it's done right, it's really good. But that shouldn't give you the false sense of security that you can just carry on. You've got to make sure you're doing your rehab work. I would suggest really getting stuck in. And Jack, if you need more help, check out the link in the profile page. What else have we got here? We've got the best way to sit and sleep with lower back pain in the right. Please focus on your rehab. The best way to sit, of course, is going to be in a neutral position, right? Try and have your thighs going away from your body. If your thighs are up like this at 90 degrees at the hip, this is going to put a flexion through the lumbar spine, flattening the lordosis, putting more pressure onto the discs. That's less ideal, right? So when we are sitting, we want to try and, like these saddle chairs are quite cool, right? This chair's probably a little bit low because I'm using the computer over there to run the live stream. But this kind of position is nice. But I'm going to get fatigued if I'm like this because I'm holding myself up on my own steam. So I want to be able to relax back into this position, but ideally I want my legs sloping away because a lot of you guys with back injuries have hamstring tightness because the hamstrings are controlled by the section of your back that is injured. And so we end up rounding the lower back, which is bad. And so we want to be able to sit back and lean back. This is a comfortable position. I can rest my arms on the side of the chair and create a bit of decompression in my back, which is quite comfortable. If we have a larger chair, we can use a small towel behind the lower back to support the natural backward bending curve. When it comes to sleeping, try and sleep on the side with it. And for ladies specifically, you sometimes want to put a towel on the side here because when you sleep on your side, your pelvis can cause you to rock into one side or the other. And that can create irritation because it changes the size of the holes where the nerves come out. Those little things can really help you be a bit more comfortable. But you've got to do your rehab work, right? Sitting is putting 40 to 90% more load through your lumbar spine. So if you're sitting and putting more pressure through your lumbar spine, well, is it any wonder that it hurts if it's injured? So you've got to do the rehab. The best way to sit without pain is rebuild your strength and stability in your spine so that you can bear the load in excess of sitting, of the load that sitting puts on your spine. Oscar said, how do I get off the bench press without aggravating my lower back? Yeah, that's a difficult one. I was just been filming Oscar some the first of the additional workouts, and it's a nice little upper body one. Should be good. But yeah, the challenge is getting off the bench is a challenge, right? You need to be at a point where you can do that sit-up action without it aggravating you. If you can't, then it's just too soon. I'd suggest probably, Oscar, looking at the seated chest press option. That's a good option for you in the short to medium term. But as you build up the load tolerance on things like the squat and the hip hinge, you'll find that the action of just like sitting back on the bench. So just as an example, because I don't want to bring the bench all the way in, but, you know, you're sat there, you're going to have to just kind of go back and lean on, and that's what you're going to have to do. And then when you've finished, I normally grab the bar, pop yourself up. One of the things you can do is if you hook around this leg, you hold this leg here, like so, it creates like a triangle, which can help you come back up with a little less strain on the lower back. That is like a little tip. But again, just, Oscar, have a little think about, you know, whether it's worth it just yet. And maybe if you can use a chest press machine, that might be a better option for you. Something to think about anyway there. Owen said, how many sets of squats can I do? Normally we say 5 sets of 10. If you need more help, Owen, I would check out the program, backinshapeprogram.com. I've put a link in the chat on the YouTube because you've got all the workouts there. But typically speaking, we talk about 5 sets of 10 as being a very good, that's the structure that we use within our workouts. It's a nice one. But obviously you've got to do the right, you've got to get the technique right, you've got to get the exercise loading right as well, and you've got to do that in a safe way to make sure that you're not running the risk of getting in trouble. Oscar said, what about a lower to high cable exercise? Like I'm assuming, Oscar, you're talking about a fly, cable fly. I don't think that's on. I think that's off. Yeah, that's off. Yeah, a high cable fly would be perfectly fine. One of the nice ones you can do, I'll turn this on, just bear with me. One of the nice ones that you can do is, there we go. One of the nice exercises you can do is like a single arm. I find that works a little bit better sometimes. So if you've got a high cable, I've got the high cable here, we can come in for a single arm cable fly. That's quite a nice one. It's quite efficient as well because you can do the left arm, that's my right arm, and you can swap over, you can come out, and you can do the left arm, one. Obviously it requires a little bit more stabilization when we're doing this. You can also do single arm chest press in this particular position. So that's what we generally talk about when you're going through the recovery process. Is it's probably a little bit more strategic to do single arm exercises. So that's obviously I'm doing it a bit off the cuff, so it wasn't as stabilized as it otherwise could be. But that could be quite a nice one for you to do, Oscar. As you'll see, the next workout, I'm probably going to be filming that tomorrow for the additional workout library, is going to include some single arm chest press work anyway. So definitely keep an eye out for that, Oscar. And I think you can really cross over the single arm chest press with a cable system. And if you're talking about going lower to higher, you can do that as well. Yeah, you can do that, and that's going to obviously hit the upper chest a little bit more. I just suggest, to be honest, Oscar, I suggest a high to low option is probably going to be a little bit more back friendly, rather than, I don't know why I'm talking to the comment over here, I should be talking to the camera. That's probably going to be a better option, a high to low rather than low to high. I'd say that's just probably better for the short to medium term. Awesome. Thanks for the question. Okay, over to TikTok. What else have we got here? We've got a few coming back in again. How to loosen the hamstrings. If you have a lower back injury, so you guys will see from the comments, most of you guys it's down here in the lumbar spine. These little nerves that go out, they go to form the sciatic nerve or contribute to the sciatic nerve. That controls your hamstrings. If you have an injury in your lower back, you're going to be perpetually plagued with stiffness in the hamstrings. And you want to try and stretch it all the time. But you find the stretching doesn't last so long and then it's stiff again. Understand you've got to fix the back problem, and then the hamstrings will release. Now, that's not to say the hamstrings will release all on their own. They might need a bit of work, but you've got to actually get to the point where you're not aggravating your back every single day, to the point where it keeps on undermining the work you're doing from stretching. So those of you that are members in the program will know that we talk about doing relief-based work, which includes things like a simple hamstring stretch. But when you're doing a simple hamstring stretch, right, you can't be rounding over like so. That's irrelevant, and it's only serving to aggravate the lower back. So you're doing your hamstring stretch. It's worthwhile doing, but your expectation of what should be happening is that it's going to be of limited benefit. It's worth doing, but of limited benefit. You've got to fix the back issue, and then it will become cumulatively beneficial from a stretching point of view on the hamstrings, but fix the back issue. Oscar, because my upper pecs are very weak. Fair enough. I mean, you could definitely do it. Just be mindful of the strain. And make sure you engage yourself. One of the mistakes I think people make, and we've all tended to do it, when we're doing the low to high variation, trying to tip over a dumbbell, when we're doing that, is sometimes you can get into a bit of an arch position, so just watch out for that because it'll jar your lumbar spine a little bit. You can also use a bench. So if you roll the bench up, obviously I don't have it at the low setting, but if you roll the bench up, you can also do it like so, and that will be a bit of a better option for you, I would suggest, Oscar, than maybe freestanding with a low to high position. So try that. Obviously moving the benches load, so you've got to be mindful of that. Owen said, what is the best way to sleep if you have an L5-S1 disc herniation? On your side like this. Boom. Ladies, generally a little towel on the side here can help. Not curled up in a ball. And you can sometimes put a pillow between the knees as well to open the knees out. That lessens the glute tension. That's generally the best position. I will say also sleeping on your front, but that's not very good for your neck. So it's a bit of a trade-off there. One of the questions, guys, we're getting into the last 10 minutes. So guys, if you have any questions, any comments, post them now. If you need any more help, there's tons of resources, both on the YouTube channel, in the profile page on TikTok. And of course, if you guys need more help and support, then definitely check out the program. There's a link to that again in the profile page on TikTok. And I've put it in, I'll just put it again in the chat on YouTube. And if you're watching this after the fact on YouTube, it'll be in the pinned comment as well, so you can check that out. Going back to the comments here. Christy is, oh, no, we missed out. Can you reverse spinal degeneration? How do you rehydrate the disc? Is this possible? Generally speaking, move that out of the way. Generally speaking, you are stabilizing the segment. You're not reversing the degenerative process. If there are bony bits, bony spurs and those kind of things, you are stabilizing that segment. You're not chipping the bits of bone away, unfortunately. And that's not, it doesn't even need to be done anyway. There's no reason you can't be pain-free, aggravation-free in spite of that degenerative change. And quite frankly, for most of you, you say things like, oh, my back pain's only been there for the last 6 months. Maybe it's been there for a year, right? But it's six months. And then they go, oh, you've got degenerative wear and tear in the L5-S1 disc. Well, that will have been there longer than the last 6 months. You had pain, you were pain-free before, and then you had the diagnosis based on pain that you've been experiencing for the last couple of weeks, couple of months of degenerative change. Well, you had it before. It's just that you injured vulnerable structures. So realizing that there's degenerative change at L5-S1, maybe the disc is quite small, that's an important highlight to the fact that we haven't been using our body effectively. Why is this poor little guy struggling so much? Why? Because we spend so much time sitting every day, we're not looking after ourselves, we're not building strength and resilience. And so it's vulnerable, and then you injure it, and then you find out that it's degenerative, and that process took years to take place, but you've only had pain for the last 6 months. So you don't have to reverse the degeneration to feel better again. But you do have to acknowledge that there's probably a lot of things that are tripping you up every single day that have been maintaining this back. And we need to address those things, which is why with back injuries, you have to have education. We just uploaded well over 250 videos to the new program, as well as the hundreds of live sessions we've done over the years as well. Like, there's a reason it's not just like 5 videos, right? There's a reason for that. And those of you that have been doing the core 5 exercises and doing some of the stuff that we've got freely available on YouTube, there is so much more from an education point of view. If you want to, you can go and watch the 1,500 videos that are on the YouTube channel if you've got that time. You can go and read the hundreds of thousands of words worth of articles that we've written by hand, typed out over the last couple of years that are on the website as well. There's a lot of information there that helps you understand how to use your body better, and that makes a big difference. Devin says, I feel like my back really exacerbated having 2 children. Yes, a lot of ladies find that they've had back pain, sciatica for a long period of time, and they can trace it back to maybe having their children. And I think a lot of that is you guys don't, or you ladies just don't get good support. Like with Celestia, when she was born January this year, like we had a physiotherapist. We didn't have this with our first child, but she kind of poked her head in and said, hey, you know, you've just had a baby. You gave birth like 3, 4, 5 hours ago, but you should do some pelvic floor exercises. And these are some of them, blah, blah, blah. See you later. Like that was the level of support. And I think the level of support from the rehab point of view is just not there when it comes to ladies postpartum. So yeah, it's something that could be improved, but you do the sort of stuff that we're talking about here and you're going to do better. Anthony said, I've only recently had back issues of L4-5, have sleeping issues, get electric shock. Focus on the day, Anthony. Too many people, it's bothersome. When we have something stopping us sleeping, it bothers us. It affects our quality of life in a big way, and that motivates us to do something about it. But the doing stuff takes place in the day. You're unfortunately suffering during the night, and I understand that, but you've got to win the day. Like, people struggle to do things right when they're conscious. How are we possibly going to quote unquote do things right when we're unconscious if we're not getting the day right 100%? So you start doing your rehab work, you start taking it seriously, you do your relief practices, you modify the things that you're doing on a daily basis. And yes, there are some little tweaks and quirks that we can do about sleeping. But generally speaking, sleeping isn't a problem in so much that sleeping is not doing something that's making the injury, the herniation, objectively worse. It's just that inflammation is accumulating overnight. You then roll over in bed while you're nice and relaxed, and you take advantage of some of that instability at the L5-S1, let's say, where the injury lies. And so focus on getting your rehab done during the day, and what you'll start to notice is the pain at night gets less, comes on later and later, and then often we just have pain in the morning, and then that goes last thing. Oscar said, is a seated leg abduction machine okay? Yeah, but I think you're getting into unnecessary accessories. I mean, if you've got the time, Oscar, fair enough, but just be mindful of how we're spending our time. If we're getting all of the essential stuff done and we want a bit of extra work, I think the seated abduction machine is perfectly reasonable. Just be mindful of tightening up those abductors too much, right? And not doing the appropriate care of self afterwards. Mike said, thoughts on the Smith machine for squats for a little more stability and avoid good mornings with the disc. I would leave out the Smith machine. You're changing the mechanics of the exercise by having that stability in there. Focus on doing an exercise that you have the competence to perform. Focus on doing the squat to a degree which you have the competence to perform, rather than trying to just push more weight. So for example, nice alternatives, the ones that we talk about a lot. You can do a goblet squat, right? You can do a goblet squat like so. You can do an assisted squat. You can hold on to something and do a squat like so. Right? That does change, or can change a little bit, the mechanics. So you try and do the squat in a way that you can let go of the assisted point and still stay standing. If you're squatting back like that, then if I let go, I'm going to fall over into a heap. I'm not doing a squat that is transferable to everyday life. Then we talk about the low hold squat, which works really nicely, right, to transition to. We end up staying more upright. We can negotiate for anatomical factors that mean that when we do a barbell squat with the weight up here, we have to hip hinge more. Those are the kind of routes that you want to take. Using machines that stabilize you kind of defeats the object, because the point of our rehab is that we are having spillover benefits. It's not just about getting muscle gains or strengthening the body up. It's also about learning movement patterns that transfer over into real life. That's why we've chosen the exercises specifically, and we're specifically not using machines in the gym to do these movements. We're learning them and getting an intimate understanding of how much we can do so we can be safer on a daily basis in that early stage of recovery. Kozin has said, I have a mild I4-5 disc bulge without pinching in the nerve, but I have chronic and severe sciatica. This is one of the things that catches a lot of people out, so much so that we did a podcast on it. You'll often go and get the MRI and they say, oh, well, it's not pressing on the nerve, so we don't know why you're getting sciatica. And they can't think laterally. If you've got a disc bulge, it may or may not be mild. That's not really, that's besides the point. You have an injury, right? And so the injury is going to bring with it inflammation. And that inflammation is going to congest this space. And so it's perfectly reasonable to get sciatica. And you start doing the rehabilitation exercises such as those we talk about. You learn to do them correctly, because if you do them wrong, that will aggravate you, right? You have to learn to do them correctly, and that takes a bit of time and should be done carefully. And then once you've done that, you'll start to protect that area a little bit more. So the inflammation calms down, then the sciatica settles down more, and you make progress from there. And you also leverage the relief-based practices that we talk about all the time to help overall with taking pressure off the lower back. Guys, just getting into the last 5 minutes here. So those of you on YouTube, if you've got any other questions, you can post them down in here. TikTok as well, I got a couple more to go through here, I think. How do you get blood and nutrients into the lower back? We've got a circulatory system that does that for you guys. Don't overthink it. We don't have to get overly complicated with some of these things, guys. The body is really, really quite intelligent. A lot of the times that we're struggling to get better is because we are in the way of the healing process. We're not supporting the body effectively. Have a good diet, a good healthy diet. Get enough protein on board. You know, make sure you're getting enough of all the micronutrients. You know, the vitamins, this, that, the other, right? From real food, ideally. That's about the level of sophistication you probably need. You start getting into more fruity things. You start worrying about the tempo of your exercises. Like, just do something that's reasonable. It's too easy to am I a robot? No, I'm not. Oh, I failed. Sorry, on TikTok, it just asked me if I can check I'm a human being. Yeah, all too often we almost use the infinite levels of complication around exercise, rehab, and diet as excuses almost not to just do the basics. The basics really work. Unfortunately, the basics don't sell so much. So everything on the internet is about this special thing that's going to fix your everything in like 3.5 seconds and whatever. And actually, the simple stuff really works. Eat real food and do real exercises and do it progressively over a period of time. Oscar said, hi, sorry for this question. I've been asking a lot. Which question? Oscar, let me know which question. But don't apologize. I'm doing a Q&A, so you can apologize for not asking questions. What are the questions have we got in here? Tattoos by Gira. But I've been doing all the exercises and decompression exercises too. Whenever I put ice on my back, it really takes the pain away, almost all the pain. Awesome, fantastic. Many people will find that contrast bathing or icing really helps manage the inflammation and congestion in the lower back. Very, very common. That's one of the practices we talk about in the program. Very, very helpful tool. About the measurements and weight load. I haven't got. Have I missed? I don't think I've missed the question, Oscar. What was the question specifically on the measurements of weight and load? If you're talking about the 40, 90%, and 100%, let me know, and then I can clarify that there. Just scrolling through some more of the comments on TikTok and on YouTube, and then I think we're going to come towards the end of today's live session. So if you've got any last questions, post them in sooner. We've got, I do RDLs and isolate the hamstrings and glutes during leg workouts. Awesome. RDLs are essentially hip hinges. Unfortunately, there's a lot of fear around doing exercises, understandably, if you've got a lower back injury. And so some of those people say, is a hip hinge the same as an RDL? Yes. But hip hinge sounds less scary than do a Romanian deadlift. You get someone, you know, imagine your mum, right? You say, you're going to do Romanian deadlifts. She might go, Romanian what? That sounds like it's going to hurt me. But a hip hinge, that sounds less scary. And so, but it's the same thing, right? It is the same thing. And they are essential movements that help you get better. And they are scalable to all levels. You can do them with assistance. You can do a hip hinge or a Romanian deadlift, and it looks like this. That might be all you're doing to start with. That's not scary if we call it a hip hinge. But that same thing if we call it a Romanian deadlift, just a very, very regressed version, sounds scary. So people immediately have the knee-jerk reaction of going, oh, well, I can't do that. The perception is really important around rehab. And often there are people that think it's really way too scary. And they don't actually appropriately evaluate the daily life things that you're willing to do every day. Walking your dog should be scary. You have no idea if around that next corner there's a cat that's going to jump out and your dog is going to take off and pull you with it. You have no idea. Yet people will regularly say, I'm worried about walking, I'm worried about doing my exercises. Yet oh yeah, what do you do? I'm walking the dog 2 times a day. Well, how can you do that and be worried about doing careful, controlled exercises? Well, I've got to walk the dog because they need to be walked. Okay, well, you need to do your exercises because that's the only thing that's going to get you better. We need to be more appropriate. Yes, Oscar, the 40%. So, important one for all of you guys to have an appreciation if you're trying to recover from lower back pain. These figures, for you, you take your body weight. So I'll use me as an example again. I weigh 92, 93 kilos. So roughly, when I'm standing, weighing 92 and a bit kilos, roughly the weight of my body is going to be about 50 kilos. I'm doing this for easy maths. It might not quite be that, but we get the idea. It's got 50 kilos that's on my spine. When I sit down, depending on the position, etc., I'm going to have around about 40% to 90% of the 50 more loading through the spine. So that could be an extra 20 to 45 kilos loading compression forces through the L5S1, L45 region. So you figure out what that is. For me, it's 20 kilos and 45 kilos sitting, more pressure. This is why so many people struggle with sitting, because it puts more load on the spine, more compression through the spine specifically, challenges those tissues. To the degree I sit badly, it's going to accentuate that specific loading through specific areas of the spine. So you've got to bear that in mind. Because it's not just the disc that's taking the load, right? Generally speaking, in the neutral position, you're going to have about 70% of the load goes through the disc, 15% through the facet joints. If I'm then flexing my lumbar spine, that's going to really focus things through specific areas. So important to understand. So just bear that in mind. So that's the figures, and you should figure those out for yourself so you then can compare your rehab exercise, like your squat and your hip hinge, to those exercises with a neutral spine. Some more questions on, hopefully that makes sense now, Oscar. So the 40% of half your body weight. That's an important distinction because of course my legs are not on my spine, so we can't include that in the calculation. Victoria said 3 bulging discs, one minor herniated L5S1, so that fits that pattern of descending, I suspect, damage through the lumbar spine, culminating, generally speaking, in L5S1 being the worst. Not always, but often. Can I do incline walking on a treadmill? No. Why would you do it? What's the purpose of incline walking on a treadmill? I've been pretty active with Pilates and avoiding twisting and certain core. A lot of the times people are doing, in your Pilates class, you'll be doing your pelvic tilts. You walking incline on a treadmill means you're doing that for an extended period, putting more pressure through the L5S1 in particular. And if you say, well, I'm actually holding on to the thing on the top, as you go into any commercial gym, a certain time of day, you're going to see a bunch of people walking on the treadmill, holding like that, walking incline. What's the point? Why are you walking on the incline, holding on to the top? It's a real pet peeve of mine. Just walk on the flat. There's no need to be walking like that. And if you're not holding on to the top, then you are actually going to be making things harder for yourself, which makes sense, right? But then you're leaning forwards to counterbalance, which is not smart for your lower back. You need to do proper rehabilitation work. Get on the cross trainer if you want to do some cardio. That's probably a better option. But make sure you're doing your rehab work. And Pilates is missing a central component of load bearing in that, in your rehab. So you've got to have that in your rehab if you're going to get better. You need to have load bearing. Otherwise, you're not building strength back into the spine. Oh gosh, I'm overrun. Okay, last one, dead hangs. Leo, go back and watch the start of the podcast because I talk specifically about dead hangs at the very, very start. But fundamentally, I think dead hangs, if they help you and do not aggravate you, then that's great. But I think that there's too much of a swing in pressure. So things like the bed decompression and towel decompression are better. If you can do them and they do not aggravate you, fair enough, have at it. Perfectly fine. But there's a larger swing, so people often find them aggravating. Maybe they feel nice when they do them, but then they hurt as soon as they let go and come back, put the load back on. Do we complete rehab work every day in the beginning? Yes, Cash, you do. Because most of the rehab work is actually just learning. You're learning the exercises. Do you think weight loss can make a significant difference, especially if really heavy? Yes, I think it can. But ladies specifically tend to carry more weight below the spine. Guys, so I think weight loss can be more impactful for the guys than the ladies, because typically speaking, and this is marginal. It's not massive, but it's something worth noting that if your weight is on your buttocks and around this area here, that's not really on your spine. Whereas guys tend to get like the gut, and that is on the spine. And so it's just something to bear in mind. It's a slight nuance from men to women. But yeah, I mean, being a more healthy weight is going to have so many different benefits to you that it's worth doing. If you're asking the question, then you know you could benefit from that. But if you're doing the right sort of rehab, gradually that rehab turns into a workout anyway. So focus on the rehab, sort the diet out. And as you go through the rehabilitation process, the rehab turns into a workout anyway. And then you're going to be doing the right sort of stuff, and you're going to find that the weight falls off. Obviously, providing you get the diet. If you just start eating bad food, then that's not going to help you. How much would a back muscle imbalance affect the disc herniation? I think we're getting caught up in the details there. Focus on more or less everybody has some element of back muscle imbalance before they had an injury, and they will do after they have an injury. And most of the people telling you that will have a back muscle imbalance to some degree. It gets exacerbated when we have an injury, especially if the injury tends to lead to more issues on one side than the other, but focus on the stability work. If you struggle reasonably to do something like a dead bug or a squat with good form, how on earth do you expect to have that you've got the coordination to effectively isolate and target specific muscle groups? People with back pain and back injuries struggle enough to do the squats, the hip hinges, and maybe a bit of step up. The idea that they're going to be coordinated and athletic enough in the throes of a back injury to start to be that specific and make those kind of nuanced changes, I think we're putting the cart before the horse. Focus on stabilizing central stuff first, the sort of stuff we teach and talk about in the program. And then if you want to get fruity, once you've built your squat and hip hinge up to body weight, as in your body weight on the bar, then you can go and do that. But so many people will try and correct those things, and they only get pointed out after they've injured themselves. Had they been pointed out before they'd injured themselves, they probably wouldn't have even bothered trying to fix it anyway. Right? Because how many of you stand like this? When you're in the queue of the shops, you're standing like a soldier. You're not. You're leaning on one side more than the other, like there. You've got kids, you're holding them on one side. You carry your bag, you're holding it on one side. All of this sort of stuff, right? Because life is asymmetrical, and you're going to have habits. You always cross one leg over the other. So trying to fix these things with a few exercises that you're not really very good at performing, it's not going to be successful. Not in a significant way anyway. Guys, I'm going to wrap it up there. Hopefully it's been helpful for you. If you guys need any more help, any more support, you've got the links in the profile page over on TikTok. You can always follow to make sure you get a notification when we go live. If you're on YouTube and you're watching this for the first time, make sure you're subscribed because I think you get the notification when we go live. I'm trying to do these a couple times a week. I might go live tomorrow. We'll see how we go with the other things that I've got to do. But hopefully it's helpful for you guys. If it is, let us know in the comments. Thank you for joining. Appreciate that. Hopefully this new angle from here instead of over there is better. You guys can see the demonstrations and stuff better. If you guys need any more support, you've got the program there. We've just had the launch of this Sunday, just gone, of the upgraded program. It's awesome. And those of you that have been struggling, going from pillar to post with your back pain, just join the program. It'll help you. It gives you everything you need, and you've got the support along the way. So thanks for watching, guys. We'll flick off on TikTok. See you next time. And those of you on YouTube, thanks again. Really appreciate that. And thanks, Leo. I appreciate that too. Glad it's helpful.